I used to teach a class at Rutgers. It was a cultural competency course. The tagline of this course was, how do you live with people who are different from yourself? Feels like a simple question. We all know it's pretty difficult, but that question is everything. We all enter this world with preconceived notions, with biases, with expectations, with ways of doing things, and we're certainly convinced that our way is the right way, and when people do things differently, something's wrong. But many of us will lose relationships before they ever even start because we can't get past our preconceived notions and biases and our expectations of who or what people are supposed to be.
Hey, hey, tell me more.
We are creatures of narrative. The way the human mind works is that it fills in the blanks. It tells stories. For most of human history, the overwhelming majority of human history, it's been an oral tradition. We live by narrative. We carry stories, stories about ourselves and stories about others. And what's insidious is that often those stories are not formed by relationship. They're formed by reputation. How we see those people over there is usually a product of what we've been told about them. These stories are like the furniture we inherit from our parents. Now, I don't know if you were like me, but when I got my first apartment, I was able to afford the apartment, but I wasn't able to afford furniture. And so my mom gave me a bunch of her old furniture. It's not quite mine, it's hers, but she passed it down and it's a little lived in, and it just sits there as assumption. That furniture sat in my living room, and it's the same with the stories that we're told and we're conditioned in. It's like this furniture that's been given to us that's just set up space in our lives, and we don't question it because it's all we've ever known. The stories, they feel like observations. They present themselves as obvious. They feel like facts. They feel self-evident. Yes, those people over there are like that, and those people over there are like that, and my people and the way we do things, we are the ones who are good, right, and true. It's an interesting way to walk through life, isn't it? Because most of us don't have the relationships that break down those stories. Most of us don't have the relationships that provide us with the disconfirming evidence that we need to know that our assumptions about those people over there and about our way of doing things are wrong. We carry those narratives. And all it takes is one person to fit the stereotype or fit the mold or fit what we think in order for us to believe them. The most load-bearing assumptions are the ones that never get examined because they just feel right. They feel obvious. Why would we examine them? Why would we question them? Because we know that they are true. They're the ones that become ingrained in our way of thinking. But just because you think that way and because you feel that way, and maybe one person might have confirmed those feelings and suspicions for you, we call that confirmation bias. It doesn't mean you're living in absolute truth. Obviously, if you've been around for a little while, you know that my work centers around this idea and concept of generational fluency. It is getting the four generations that currently work together to work together well, to understand each other. And a part of that comes from the stories we tell. The stories that are handed to us from the world that we grew up in, from the waters that we swim in. The narratives that we carry about Gen Z or about millennials or about boomers and about Xers. Xers, I didn't forget you. I know Gen X feels like the lost and forgotten generation. I see you, I'm here, I got many words for you. But these narratives we carry weren't formed in a vacuum. They were formed by our own generational experience, by our own wounds, by our own unmet expectations in life. So when a boomer talks about a Gen Z employee being all entitled and all of these things, in reality, this is a boomer who is speaking from a place and a social location and a time that told him that silence is a virtue. You suffer in silence. That's what you do. You don't talk about your feelings. You don't bring that stuff from out there in here. And Gen Z constantly talking about their feelings and complaining. They need to just suck it up and pay their dues. Now, on the flip side of that, when a Gen Z employee is talking about leaders not caring about their people, then They might be talking about the actions of this particular leader, but what they're also talking about is a lifetime of watching institutions fail, of watching people who were supposed to be the ones who took care of them, who took care of society, not live up to their jobs. Neither one of these narratives is wrong. They're both just speaking from the experiences that form them, but both are woefully inadequate to describe the person who is in front of them. I grew up in a really small world. Now, you might hear that and think to yourself, but CJ, you are from New York City, largest city in the country, arguably the most important city in the culture, the center in the country, the center of culture, the center of finance. We invented hip hop. For a long time, I can own this now, but for a long time, the best basketball players came out of New York. We were the center of everything, art, culture, movies, all of it. We set Wall Street sits where I am. My borough, Brooklyn, would be the fourth largest city by itself. And yet I tell you, I grew up in a small world. Because my city of 8.5 million people is but a sliver of the global population. I don't do math, but what is that? 8 billion and I don't know, 1% or something like that? I would be a fool to think that the way we did things was the only way, the absolute way, the ultimate way. But let me get it even more granular. I grew up in the most diverse city in the country, and yet I didn't meet a white person on a peer level till I got to college in North Carolina. I knew a handful of Asian people, didn't meet a South Asian person till I was an adult. I grew up in New York in a time where we didn't really have Mexicans. Like, all of my Hispanic friends were Puerto Rican or Dominican. And the Dominicans didn't come around till high school. So think about how limited this experience is. I didn't meet a Canadian until I was an adult. And yet I could think to myself, but I'm from New York. I know it all. But that's just not true. And in reality, we can all grow up in these really diverse places and still live in these little ethnic enclaves, these little bubbles. I know people from Harlem. Harlem is like a 40-block radius who have never left Harlem. So think about this limited experience. I grew up in a world where every man in my family and every adult man I knew worked in construction. I figured out real early, these don't build things. If you need a handyman, I'm not your guy. I'm gonna think for you. I'm gonna synthesize some data. And with AI now, I don't even know how useful I am. Actually, if you are traveling and you need a restaurant recommendation, I got you. Life expectancy for me was short. I scored really high on the ACEs test. My life should have been over before it even started. If there was ever going to be a change for me, if I was ever going to, achieve above my station, so to speak, I was going to need to get outside of my bubble. I was going to need to tell a different story about myself and about the world around me, about what my options were, about what I can do and achieve in this life. Here's the thing about bubbles. Bubbles will cloud your vision. Bubbles will keep you from being able to see clearly, or keep you from being able to see others clearly. For those who are not in the bubble, it keeps you from being able to see yourself clearly. I think about who I am and what I love and what I want to do. I couldn't truly know myself inside of a bubble, because when we're in the bubble, we operate by default. We just do what our people do. We go where our people go. We eat what they eat. We say what they say. We think what they think. And how many of us ever get a perspective outside of our own before the thoughts and the habits and the way of thinking become too ingrained? And this is the problem of the world that we live in right now, where many of us will say, but I'm outside, I see people of all different stripes, and I go to these different places and I do these different things. But the majority of our time is spent on our phones, scrolling deeper and deeper into an algorithm that becomes its own sort of digital bubble and its own sort of digital feedback loop and its own sort of echo chamber. And one day we look up and the stories we tell and the seeming evidence we have for it and the way we view and see the world, it's not based on fact. It's not based on real life experience. It's what we've seen on our algorithms and on our feeds and in our small little worlds around us. And the stories we tell and the narratives we live by are not the ones that we've come up with or we've even thought through, but they're the ones that have been handed to us. And the problem is, many of us don't consider where the narratives come from. About 10 years ago, I gave a talk on racial justice, and there was a guy in the crowd who said, hey, can we grab coffee sometime? I said, sure, why not? You want to talk more about this? We can talk more. This guy was from Singapore. We had a good conversation. He was an exchange student in New York for about a year or so, and he had already been in New York for about 8 months at that point. And at the end of our conversation, he goes, man, this really surprised me. I go, why? He goes, you're the first black person I ever spoke to. And I was like, what? You've been in New York for 8 months. You live in Brooklyn. Like, what do you mean I'm the first black person you've ever spoken to? And he said to me, the last thing my parents said to me before I got on the plane was make sure you stay away from black people. And so he walked through New York for 8 months with fear and just happened to enter a room that I was in with a stage that I was on and a mic that I was given. And I was the first person to break that bubble. But what if we never met? How many people live with those kinds of narratives? And where did that narrative even come from? I've never been to Singapore. Actually, I've been in the airport. I didn't see a lot of black people. And I'm not going to pull the numbers right now, but I'm going to guess there aren't a lot of black people in Singapore. So where'd that come from? But I can go a step further. I was in Trinidad a few years ago. And everyone looks like me. That's where my family is from. And I had a cousin ask me, hey, is every black person in America like that? And I was like, what do you mean, like what? And she's like, you know, like Love and Hip Hop and all the reality shows. There's a narrative that has been formed. And if all we have is media and algorithms and don't have people in real life, then we're gonna believe the narratives and we're gonna believe the algorithms and we're gonna hold people and look at them in such a way that we never get to experience the full version of them because all we have are caricatures. And it's not just they who suffer for that, but it's us as well. Because what's cut off from our lives and from our expansion as people when we decide that entire categories are not worth our time and attention. So now I ask you, as you consider your narratives and the stories you've been told and the stories you tell, what do you give up if they're not true? What do you lose if your assumptions about those people, whoever those people might be for you, are wrong? And what about yourself? What do you lose if you stop believing the stories that you tell about you? See, that's the question under the question. Sometimes we hold on to narratives because letting go of them might mean that we have to apologize to somebody. It might mean that we have to sit and wrestle with some uncomfortable realities, and it might mean that we have to apologize to ourselves. That we gotta own the ways that we have not been kind to ourselves, that we believe things about ourselves that are not true, that we've held our own selves back because of our limiting beliefs. But we don't get here by ourselves. The stories we're told and breaking through them are very rarely happening in isolation. We need people and disconfirming evidence to break these thought patterns. People who can challenge us and people who can challenge the narratives, because we don't change in isolation. There, almost every bit of neuroscience out there that talks about the way people change will tell you that change happens in community, that it happens with others, that we are not meant to live this life alone. Isolation always breeds distortion. When you examine the stories that you're telling, and you revise those stories and you edit those stories and you really speak into them, you become more generous with people. Suddenly we stop assuming simplicity for others where we want complexity for ourselves. And when we edit and we revise those stories, we become more accurate. Because I want to speak to you in the language that you would use, from the frame that you would use in your understanding. That is how I know that I truly got you. And accuracy is the foundation of generational fluency and personal mastery. We're not guessing. We're not going on caricatures. We're not painting with a broad brush. I want to speak to you, about you, in the words that you would use so that I can help you be the best version of yourself, so that I can be the best version of me. When we think and we behave and we move in this way, we become more curious. And curiosity Curiosity, I think, is probably the greatest skill that you can have in this life. If there's one character trait that I want you to develop and keep pushing into, it is to be curious. It is to ask more questions. It's to be inquisitive. It's to want to know what you don't know. The worst people I know, the worst people I've seen, are the ones who don't have any questions. The ones who think they know everything, the ones who think that they have it all figured out. But if there is anything I understand to be a key to life, it is that you never truly arrive. And so when we're running around here trying to tell stories and frame narratives and understand people, then you gotta be a real good detective. And you gotta be gracious, and you gotta be humble, and you have to recognize that your way is a way. It is not the way. It might be a good way. It could even be a better way, but it's not the only way. And that's hard for us. But sometimes we just need to sit back and listen and trust that the person who has lived what we are talking about knows what they're talking about. The stories you tell about people who grew up differently from you, it's not really a reflection on them. It's often a reflection on you. You and your wounds and your values and your unmet expectations, you and your unfulfilled desires, you and your unexamined inheritance. What does that furniture in the living room of your life look like? The leaders who recognize this, they become more honest. And honest leaders are not soft, S-A-W-F-T, soft. The leaders who are honest are the ones that people want to follow. They're the ones who are more gracious. They're the ones who take the time to listen. They're the ones who get the best out of their people because they're not just throwing blanket advice out there or generic development plans, but they're seeing the person in front of them. And they're calling that person to be the absolute best version of themselves. And those are the leaders we want to be. Those leaders build teams where every person from every generation feels like they have a seat at the table. And not a ceremonial seat, but a real seat. That's hard. It's not the easy work, but it's the most valuable. It's not the most efficient, but it is the most prescient. Now listen, you might be thinking to yourself in this moment, CJ, I hear you, but I'm gonna stick with my narratives because my narratives have served me well. The way me and my people have done things have always led to success, and why would I dare step into someone else's story? I don't have time for that. Good. Keep doing what you're doing. You let me know how that works out for you. But I know from personal experience, as the leader and the one being led, is that the leader who takes the time to know the story becomes the best version of themselves. The leader who has the humility to broaden their aperture and say, I don't know everything. What can I learn from you? Is the one who goes the furthest. But listen, I'm not even 40 yet, right? I could just be wrong. Because what do I know? I'm just some guy from Brooklyn.